Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number 11 of the Time to Calibrate podcast. Bob here from the YouTube channel Time to Go Travel and Timepieces, along with co-hosts Brent from the Calibrated Wrist and Mark, writer at Worn and Wound. Today, we have special guest host Dan Mann from the Dansome on Instagram. How's it going, Dan? Good to have you.
Oh, hi. This is exciting times for me. It would have been better if it was the 12th episode.
Yeah, that's true.
I like to segue for everyone. That is my joke.
But it's great to have you, Dan. Most of us in the watch sphere know Dan Mann as the mad cat creator behind the Dansome on Instagram, whose irreverent and authentic approach to storytelling can transform the most mundane moments into captivating narratives. What most may not know about Dan is that he actually also has 20 years of tech experience in digital agency life, testing websites and apps. A decade ago, Dan's passion for golf led him to writing for a golf website, to building a vibrant Instagram presence. More than just stunning visuals, his Instagram is a space for small brands to shine. Whether showcasing niche golf gear, boutique watches, or lifestyle treasures, Dan is dedicated to championing the underdogs, proving that the smallest brands often have the biggest stories. Today, as a full-time creator, his specialties include golf, watches, and of course, salon-quality hair. Whether it be the precision of a golf swing or the craftsmanship of a timepiece, his work highlights the sophistication and lifestyle behind every shot, making him a sought-after talent for brands looking to elevate their visual storytelling. Now, Dan, what our listeners really want to know is what's on your wrist, and are you wearing pants?
First of all, who wrote that?
We try to make everybody look good on this channel, Dan.
I am wearing a 12 Days of Dansome giveaway, the Hamilton-based Lock & King James in black, and I am wearing watermelon underwear at the moment. So there you go.
That sounds juicy.
Oh, God.
So for me, I'm actually wearing the watch that Dan is giving away, myself, Dan, and Vario is giving away. It was announced today. By the time you listen to this, it'll still be available to give away, but the watch is the Vario Navi single hand, and I am wearing Saks underwear, Dan. Since we're doing underwear checks too here.
Cannot wear Saks. I find there's too much extra fabric in the middle back.
I'm going to stay well clear of that.
Mark, how about just the wrist this time?
Yeah, just the wrist. I'm wearing my Isotope Hydrium California watch that reminds me of the Toronto Timepiece show, and every time I wear it, it brings back those memories and that fun time. Really loving it.
That's awesome. I actually have on the S&P 300 today, actually. And normally, lately I've been wearing that Longines Legend Diver that I just got, but I was wearing blue today and it looked kind of blue sitting there all on its own. So I picked it up and that's what I've got on wrist.
Nice.
So we're all well outfitted today.
Yep.
All right, so I guess we can get to the first question. This is going to be a Q&A video. Dan has not been had the opportunity to prepare like some of us, so we'll see how things go. But question number 1 is submitted to the show by Cinziana Iordache. I think I pronounced that correctly. She is Cinziana Iordache on Instagram. She's an excellent artist. Is there a specific watch that got away, one that you had the opportunity to own, passed on it, and regret it ever since? Mark, maybe you can go first on this one.
Sure. Years ago, probably close to 10 years ago, I had an opportunity to trade for a Grand Seiko SBGE 201. That's the full-size 44 millimeter spring drive sport GMT with a black dial and the red GMT hand. I don't know why I backed out of that trade deal. Something was either fishy or something. I don't know what it was, but I regretted it because, again, those prices started climbing and I never quite got another opportunity for it. And then when my 50th birthday came up last year, that was the watch I was hunting for when I came across my green SPG 257, which is the 40.5 millimeter version of the same watch. So I still think about the bigger one, and every time I go to a Grand Seiko store, I look at it, I pick it up, and I think I made the right choice. I'm very happy with my watch, and if anybody's ever curious, I wrote an article on that on the Worn and Wound, how I hunted for that 50th milestone. How about you, Brent?
Well, actually, for me, it was kind of a catch and release. It was the Zodiac Super Seawolf. It was the very first Swiss watch that I had ever purchased. I bought it secondhand from a guy in Montreal, actually. It's the one that had like a steel bezel iteration. It had a really beautiful dark blue dial with that sort of radial burst that was on it. Really nice light green triangular markers at the cardinal points. It was like, the quintessential true skin diver. But I sold it on about 2 years ago, around the same time that I sold my Halios Fairwind. And, I find sometimes in this hobby where, you're selling in order to move up a level, and you're not really thinking too much about it. You're thinking more about that next purchase. And that's one, I sold it to a friend. And so I see it from time to time. And every time I see it, I think, oh, geez, I really should have held on to that watch.
Oh, yeah. Been there.
What about you, Bob?
For me, the big one was, and it was in the very early days of getting into watches, I found a really good deal on a Schumacher Reverse Panda Speedy. And I had it serviced. There was a couple of little issues with it, but I had it serviced by Omega, and I wore it very sparingly because I think I wasn't ready for a watch at that kind of price tag. At the time, I was nervous about it. And I let it go, and that's the big one. That's the one I would love to get again, but it's shot up like crazy in price, so not going to happen anytime soon, but we'll see. Anyone's that got away, Dan, or?
I don't. I've just, slowly getting back into watches over the last 4 years. I've more learned the impulse buys that I probably didn't need, but nothing that's gotten away yet. I've done things like buy a moon swatch a year ago and then think, oh, this feels like a $2 watch. It was a Saturn. It just didn't mean anything to me. But then again, I bought the Snoopy last month and I can't take it off my wrist. So yeah, no, there's no real watch that's gotten away yet, or basically.
Yeah. So question number 2 was submitted by my friend Meg Tochi. She goes by Minute Meg on Instagram, and she's also a contributor at Worn and Wound. I highly suggest you go follow her on Instagram. Her posts are wonderful. She does a lot of traveling in the U.S. She lives in Colorado, and she's a historian. And she travels, to all the various national parks. She did Route 66, I think, last summer, and she detailed all that in a post on Worn and Wound. So yeah, go follow her. Her question is you can only wear one watch style from now on. If field, diver, dress, pilot, whatever. What is it and why? Bob, how about you go first on that one?
So I would have to go for a Thule watch, and I think I would either sort of be between a diver and a field watch, but more so the field watch, just because I think it's a bit more versatile. You can kind of wear it just about anywhere. So if I had to pick, I think field watch would be the one for me.
Cool. Brent?
For me, it's got to be a dive watch. While I do dive recreationally, my decision has more to do, I think, with its go anywhere, do anything kind of status, especially luxury divers, the ones that kind of couple a refined look with the capabilities and the water resistance of a diver. So I'm thinking here like things like Seamasters or the Longines Legend Diver, for example. You could walk right out of the water and into a nice restaurant with a watch like that. I swim a lot. I kayak. But if I'm honest, I also just love the look of a diver.
Yeah, that piece you just put up on YouTube for your Legend Diver is very good. I recommend everyone go take a look at that. For me, it's the same thing. It's what was the gateway for me into watches. I've always loved dive watches. I love them so much that at a point I had my own forum called the Ultimate Dive Watch Forum. This is before Watch You Seek, and it gotten pretty big. It got so big that I couldn't handle it on my own. I wound up giving it to Roland Murphy and Equation of Time, where I moderated there for a while. So yeah, dive watches for me. I love the look. I love the style. I like having a rotating bezel to fiddle with. I think it's just like having a hypercar or sports car. You're never going to go 200 miles an hour on the highway, but it's nice that you can if you wanted to, right? So dive watch, the same thing. You know, it's capable to go 1,000 meters underwater, or 300 or 200 or 150, whatever. You'll never go, but you know it's great that it's possible and it can do there, and it's just an adventure waiting to happen on your wrist.
Right on.
What about you, Dan?
Racing chrono. Yeah, the one watch style I always come back to is chronographs. I love busier dials, sub dials, having something going on with the bezel, a little, just pushers. I like busy watches. I think that's the easiest answer. And I've always just loved two-tone, like chronograph style watches.
So busy, like a Navi timer kind of thing, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know what I don't have in my collection that I absolutely love? Like a world timer chrono with all the cities around the outside on the bezel. Woolbrook has one, and I love my Woolbrook watches. I think they're incredible value for what they sell them for. And that's kind of one of the watches that I really want is their world timer chronograph. But I had been waiting for them to come back with the bluey green loom, and then they did. And then I was like, oh, I got laid off. I shouldn't get one. So I did. Yeah.
Way to bring the podcast down there.
Well, Dan, we have the first few questions under our belts right now. So I'm just going to talk a little bit to you about, why it is we invited you here, particularly today. You're in the thick, for example, of a very big project at the moment. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on with your Instagram account and why that's happening?
Well, for those who aren't familiar, it is currently something called the 12 Days of Dance. I love Christmas. I love the holidays. I don't think no matter what age you are that you should be like, I'm an adult. I don't do Christmas. Like, this is the nostalgic, feel good time of year. And I wanted to do something at the end of the year to showcase and thank the brands I work with. That's how it started. And then be able to give back to the community, because without the community and the support, none of us would have platforms to be on. So I wanted to put something together that brought everyone together with the brands and brought more recognition back to them. And that started out 4 years ago as 12 days and 12 giveaways. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here. Fast forward 4 years to 23 days and 48 giveaways we're doing this year.
Wow. That's fantastic.
So, yeah, we're only 6 days in as we record this, so nobody knows the actual number, but we're doing 2 a day. Yeah, but it has grown this year, and I'd love to hear your feedback too. I really want to make this about community driven and bring everybody into the event. And that's why I now have 20 co-hosts, guest host content creators from the community bring in their brands. And this helps give a platform to everybody else to showcase them and their accounts, because people might not know about them. And I don't believe in being in it for all about yourself. I think we're stronger as a community and helping others. And that is the whole point of this. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Well, I know that you used a reel that I put together for your kickoff day, and I will tell you that the amount of feedback and appreciation that I received from that video, and I'm sure it was the same for you, was fantastic. It spawned so many impromptu DMs and great conversations. And you know what I think is interesting for the audience to know is that a lot of people will see the sort of public face of the Dansome, but what they don't see is all the stuff you're doing behind the scenes. So, for example, you have a special chat group established for all the people who are helping you out, the brands, the creators, and that sort of thing. And that has just become a safe space that is so full of humor and gregarious interactions. It's been phenomenal.
Should we pause here and say, we're sorry, Mark, that you're not part of this. You're only one of us.
I'm starting to feel bad, but no, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Robbie. Maybe I should just stop.
No, keep going. It's all good.
But the fact that this whole thing's just spawned such conviviality, both in that small space and that really just shows in the larger space of Instagram as well. People have just been fantastic, and your site, your channel, of course, doesn't deal specifically and exclusively with watches. It deals with a lot of other stuff as well. It deals a lot with golf, and yet you see people coming from all of those different walks of life and just having a great time together. It's a fantastic community building exercise for sure.
I started as a golf account and a golf photography and golf products. And when I got into watches, I'm like, do I do my personal account as my watch account? And, watches are a lifestyle thing. So why not just cross it over and grow everybody likes watches. And if they don't, they like golf. And it's been successful, and it's made me a lifestyle account, being able to cross the two. So, that's what I think of myself now, is just, a lifestyle account. I mean, heck, we're giving away meat in the 12 Days of Dancing.
And cheese.
And cheese, yes.
I have to tell you, Dan, I started following you a while ago. And earlier this summer, you had posted a series of yourself in a T-shirt, and, well, that's about it. And you were doing some dancing moves and a bunch of pictures, and then it was a series of a lot of golfing. And I was like, this isn't really for me. And I didn't get the satire at the beginning with the T-shirt and all that stuff. And I was like, is this guy taking himself seriously? He's trying to... I didn't get it. So I stopped following you. Sorry. Then we met at the Toronto Timepiece show. And I got to see some of your work there. And then we had dinner together with Roby and Caroline and Phil from Visitor, Tyler. And we had a really good time and a good chat. And so I obviously started following you again. And now I get it. And it's so much fun. The humor is there. The satire is there. Every time you post something, I repost it, or I put it into my stories to try to highlight, what you're doing. And the 12 Days of Dansome has been really a lot of fun. And especially the first one, when I saw Roby come on, it was really nice.
And I got to say something to you. I got to thank you. Because you repost stories, you comment, you have been so supportive. I really appreciate it. And I know what you mean. You get what I'm doing now. There's definitely some satire, but I mean, Jim, the owner of Sub 70, he'll go to a golf course and someone will come up to him and say, is that Dan Mann guy just weird? What's wrong with that guy? And he's like, Danny is the sweetest, he's the nicest guy you'll meet. He's a normal human being, but you've got to understand there's a bit of a shtick to what he does on his account. But yeah, I'll get X number of new followers for these giveaways who are there for giveaways, and I'll post one pantless photo in January, and trust me, they're gone. You'll see the numbers just go down, but it's...
Oh, we all do, for sure.
I'm here to make fun of myself, and I hope people enjoy it.
It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that one video you did with the horse bear, where you're sitting on the ground with him at the Toronto Timepiece show. I've showed that to my kids. I showed it to my wife. Well done. And keep it up. Don't stop.
I was in there before anybody opened. I couldn't sleep at 6 a.m. I'll go down and get all my reels started. And I'm like, screw it. I took the cover off the bear and stole it from the horse booth. And I'm like, I haven't sold the bear. Forget it.
Well, it was good really to meet you in person there, Dan, for the first time. That was a lot of fun. And I think pretty much everybody in this group will be seeing you again in the spring next year in Vancouver. So that's something we're all looking forward to.
Are you guys trying to stay on my couch too? You're not trying to stay on my couch as well.
That's not a bad idea.
I won't tell you, but yeah.
All right, so we can maybe get back to a couple of the questions here. And this one comes from Mike Pearson from Christopher Ward. He says, you've all traveled extensively for watches. What is the best meal you've had in what city did you eat it? What about you, Mark?
I haven't traveled so much for watches, but I have traveled, and the best meal I've had recently was in Chania, Greece. It was outside the city. We found a place in the mountains in a small little taverna, a little village restaurant that was overlooking a cliff. The food was tremendous. The hospitality was incredible. They even provided, most Greek places, if ever you go to Greece, they'll provide dessert for free. They'll bring you ice cream or something. And they gave us a caramelized carrot with yogurt, and it was so good. And they also provided raki, which is it's like a kind of Greek moonshine or grappa, Italian grappa kind of thing. It was cinnamon, and it tasted like you were drinking cinnamon bun. It was so good. Next time we go to Crete, we're gonna drive all the way there just to eat there again. It was phenomenal.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
How about you, Brent?
Well, so when I got Mike's question, I wasn't sure if he meant the best meal I ever had while traveling specifically for watches or whether it just travel in general. So I kind of have two answers here. Well, the one for watches came in 2022. And that was when I was part of a press junket with Longines at the FIS World Cup of Ski in Lake Louise. And after the first day of skiing, we had the most amazing fondue meal, which was followed up by many different courses, including filet mignon, etc. And it was all at the Walliser Stube in the Fairmont Chateau, Lake Louise. So each course was paired with a different wine. There was a sommelier on hand, etc. And of course, it didn't hurt that it was also in this 19th century library. It was an absolutely wonderful experience all around for all the senses. But I actually even had a better meal this summer when I was traveling with my wife in Malta. We went to this place called the Grotto, and it was in the city called Rabat, right in the center of the island. And it's the only time in my life that I've actually eaten at a Michelin star restaurant. Now, basically, it was in a place called the Cave Room in this actual restaurant. We had this 5-course grotto experience meal. And again, each thing was paired with a different local drink, etc. The entire meal took place in the grotto itself, so a natural cave system. And it was actually used during World War II as a bomb shelter. So again, just the entire experience of it. And the food was absolutely out of this world. It was basically the cost of a down payment on a house, but it was definitely worth it.
How about you, Dan?
Well, it wasn't the Marriott Courtyard at the Toronto Timepiece show, I can tell you that.
That diner wasn't bad, though.
Oh, yeah. I haven't been to, that's the only watch associate event I've been to, but I've been to many like golf companies. Cleveland Strixon flew me down to Huntington Beach once, and it wasn't a fancy restaurant, but the first day they took us for lunch at this little local Mexican joint, and I had a burrito that was so good. I will never forget that.
So not Taco Bell.
I tell you, that trip, I landed in the United States. The reason I remember that trip is because it was the day after the 2016 election. And yeah, it was a different world down there.
For me, I'd have to say the best foods I have ever eaten was also in Crete. I'd have to agree with Mark on that one. And I was going to even say that, but sort of a watch related one. My wife and I were in Nashville. She had a conference and I just tagged along to make a trip out of it. And do you guys know Paul, Wristwatch Check Daily? You remember him? He hasn't posted in a little while. He's kind of an EDC guy. Had a really good following, but he picked me up or my wife and I up and took us on a tour around Nashville. And we ended up at I think it's called the Loveless Motel. It's a diner, and just the Nashville hot chicken and the pulled pork and the whole, just like a mountain of meat, basically, was consumed there. And I'll never forget that. That was a lot of fun. Also, Mike is asking, just a one-word quick answer here. Original or classic Bel Canto?
I'm going to go with the original, the Nero.
Really, I'm going to go with the classic, the silver dial with the blued hands. That's just perfection.
I do like the Argento. It's the Roman numerals. I prefer the original.
Dan?
I don't know the difference. I'm Googling right now. Bel Canto classics. Bel Canto back out. Oh, classic. Oh, yes. Classic for sure.
And you know, it's quite a deceiving because you got original and classic, which I don't know, man. Original Coke or classic Coke? I'm not sure.
What about you, Bob?
I got to spend a little time with the blue classic, so I'm going to have to say the classic.
Very cool. So the next question comes from our friend Stephen Mazinger, who goes by Watches in Nature on Instagram. So watches_in_nature, or he has a website called timetoblogwatches.com. This gentleman is a friend of ours, a mutual friend. He's kind of rough around the edges sometimes, but he says it how it is. And his question is a very important question, is how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? And in my opinion, there's only one answer. It's 3, and then you crunch it, just like the owl in the commercial when we were kids. So we got that out of the way. So I'm going to give him a better question, which I'm sure is what he has in mind. And that's, which is better, Tritium tubes or traditional LumiNova? And Steven told me that whatever answer we give, he's going to live with and he's going to accept. So, Bob, what do you think?
I love like the initial like blast from LumiNova over Tritium tubes, but once your eyes are adjusted to the dark, like if you grab a Tritium watch in the morning, it seems powerful. You know what I mean? Like is it just as powerful as Super LumiNova? So and more so in reality at that after however many hours. So I prefer LumiNova just because it's a bit more eye candy with the initial blast, but I'm kind of on the fence. You're gonna have somebody else is gonna have to make the final call for Steven there.
Okay, well, I'm obviously a good friend of Steven's on Instagram as well, and so I went hard on this question, and because I want to be fair about my answer, but I think really the question comes down to this: it's about photoluminescence versus radioluminescence. So Super LumiNova is just it's a brand name, right? So the thing is that it falls into the photoluminescent category, which basically means it's storing light so that it can slowly emit that stored energy throughout the evening. And tritium, on the other hand, it's a low yield radioactive substance that doesn't need charging at all. And so basically it will decay, but it will take about 12 to 30 years, depending on how much tritium you actually had in there to begin with. So there are different grades of Super LumiNova. You have, standard A grade, you have X1, and you also have different types. So there's different colors. C3 is the one that the human eye perceives the best. So if you have a really thick, excellent coat of X1 C3 Super LumiNova, you are going to get a huge blast of light in the early going after it's been charged. And, it could last up to 15 hours. Most, though, will probably die off somewhere in the range of 5 to 8 hours. Tritium, on the other hand, comes in sort of two types, T25 and T100. That has nothing to do with how bright they are, but how much tritium actually exists on the dial. So obviously, the more tritium on the dial, the more bright we perceive it to be. But Super LumiNova, on the other hand, is a paint, and you can be super creative with that. I mean, you can do all kinds of different, plot markers, dot markers, triangles, all kinds of really cool stuff. Tritium, which began its life as a paint, isn't really used that way anymore because it's not safe. It's radioactive. So for that, they use those gas tubes, right? So the gaseous tritium light source. Now, here's where we get to the nitty gritty. There is an amazing video on YouTube, and it's on Just the Watch. The host is Dave. I'll leave a link in the show notes afterwards. But what he shows is that even the best applications of Super LumiNova will die after 30 to 35 minutes, back to the point where it is no longer brighter than tritium. So it may last 15 hours, but it's not going to be as bright as tritium for the majority of that 15 hours. So I'm going to say, if you're judging Lume for its long-lasting brightness, then tritium is the clear winner. And my litmus test for this would be, if you were going to be stuck in a cave and you only had the choice of one, you can't recharge one, and one doesn't need to be charged. So it would be tritium for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The T25, T100, that's the millicurie. So it's the amount of tritium that's as a whole in the watch, not in the tubes. So basically a T100 watch will just have more tubes on the dial, right? So that's where that comes from. I've been a fan of that kind of luminescence for years. I've had over 20 ball watches. I've had KHS, Armor. I've had Luminox. I've had a lot. And in my opinion, and what I want is to be able to read the time when I need to. And with a LumiNova watch, or LumiBrite, in the case of my Grand Seiko, which unfortunately only has 4 lume plots for the hours, the cardinal points, and the hands, which are slithers. It's great when you charge it up. It's fantastic. I can read it for 20 minutes or half an hour. After that, not so much. The plots are small. The amount that's on the hands are small. I'm 50 years old. My eyesight's not what it used to be. So, the tritium at 3:00 in the morning, I barely have to open half my eyelid and I can read the time immediately. So for me, it's Tritium all the way. Now, we also have a mutual friend that works at Seal Instruments that we had on the show. And apparently the stuff that he's concocted lasts a solid 19 hours. And he sent me a video. Actually, it's a couple of pictures of, when it's first charged versus a marathon SAR at 1 hour and at 6 hours. And his stuff was still brighter than the Tritium. So he's sending us a watch to play with soon. So we'll be able to check that out ourselves. I'm going to lend it to Brent so he can take some incredible pictures as he usually does. And we'll give that a test. But until then, Tritium is king. And like I said, I have a marathon SAR now, a white dial version. And at 3:00 in the morning, I could practically read the word marathon on the dial. That's my answer. What about you? We've got a 2-to-1 Tritium score right now. What about you, Dan?
Which one can I paint little happy faces on the watch dial? That's all I care.
Well, if you're a ball watch, they certainly try to go with the tubes.
I don't understand a word Roby just said, but I just want to say tubes. I don't care either way. Like, whatever application is going to make the given watch fun, I'll just roll with it. So, but yes, if I was stuck in a cave, I want the one that doesn't need to be recharged.
There you go. So 3-1 Tritium. Stephen, you have to live with that, and you have to accept it, and you have to do it publicly on Instagram. All right. He's going to kill me.
I was so worried what his question was going to be. Oh.
Yeah, that wasn't his question. I made all that up, but I just really wanted to say Tritium.
Actually, though, I was thinking, how am I going to answer this Tootsie Pop question? So I Googled it, and there is an actual Purdue University study. 365, one lick a day.
No way.
For a year, and your Tootsie Pop's done.
Yeah, I did actually see that there's a University of Florida and University of Michigan and a bunch of other places that actually did studies about that. My answer was just, it depends how much you suck. So, all right. So this next question actually comes from a listener. His name is Richard. He asks, so I'm relatively new to the hobby, about 5 years, and very much enjoying all aspects of it. I know the three of you are seasoned vets at this point and all very passionate about the hobby, but what keeps you going? Is it the people, the new releases? Do you not get saturated at some point that the excitement for new pieces and events is just more of the same? So many hobbies seem to come and go, but us watch people seem to be quite a dedicated bunch. What is it for you? Bob, do you want to start us off?
For me, it is 100% the people, especially to have this kind of hobby like this going for so long. I think without the people, it would have petered out for me. Without having people to talk to about the hobby, I think it would have fizzled away eventually. New watches are awesome. Love getting hands on with new watches and tracking down watches for my own collection. But it's all about the people, I think, for me. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, for me, when I started, it was the new watches, really, because all I had at the time were magazines. And in Montreal, there weren't a lot of dealers. There weren't a lot of authorized places that sold all of the brands that I was able to see in the magazines. And then the internet came around. And that's what opened my eyes to brands like Oris, to Tudema, to Fortis, to a bunch of obscure, lesser-known brands that were relatively affordable at the time. And that was a lot of fun. And for me, it was trying to acquire the watches that I wanted without spending too much money. So I was trading a lot, right? So I would flip watches all the time. And whenever Baselworld would come around, which is once a year, all the brands used to release, not like it is now where people are releasing all the time. I used to get upset when cool stuff would appear because it meant you had to wait till October or November before those things actually appear to the store, if they ever appear to the stores in Montreal. So it was difficult. So I was kind of crossing my fingers that there would be nothing that really want, right? And then, the internet happened, and then there's all kinds of for sale places, on Time Zone, on Watch You Seek, and Watch Recon now, and all this other stuff. So that's made it a little easier. Prices have shot up like crazy, so it's more difficult to flip and acquire and accumulate. But the friends I made along the way on the original forums, and now with the podcast to you two guys that we've become great friends, the Toronto Timepiece Show has really really enhanced that for me. And I even have a small group of guys that I met at the Red Bar before the Toronto Timepiece show, and then they came to the Toronto Timepiece show, got to hang out with those guys. And now we have a little group here in Montreal that we meet for beers, every couple of weeks. And it's the people and the new stuff coming out all the time. And of course, writing for Warner Wound, I get to see a lot of things ahead of time. It's really hard to sit on those embargo things when you get them. So I'm sitting on one now, and I'm dying to talk about it, but can't. So yeah, the people and the fun watches, and now with the micro brands, of course, making things more affordable and them getting really, really good. I'm expecting a Ikigai watch that's coming in the mail. I mean, sub $500 US, and it's spectacular what's being made out in the Far East. So yeah, the watches, of course, and of course the people.
100% the community. The community is what drives it for me and keeps me coming back. The shared passion and be able to communicate with anybody about the same thing. But I mean, the real answer is it's when people ask me, why watches? Okay, so you love art on a wall. Watches are my art. There's a beauty and intricacy to every single watch. It's the reason I love my Timex Qs as much as I love my Rolex. Just sitting there looking at a $200 watch on your wrist at a traffic light and seeing that domed acrylic on the Timex and just the way the light hits it and things. They're art to me, and there's a beauty that just keeps me coming back.
Well, I think that watches are more about the hunt than they are about the actual acquisition, to be frank. I've got ongoing searches programmed in the Chrono 24, not because I'm planning on buying, but because I'm dreaming of buying, for example. People use that metaphor about going down the rabbit hole all the time, and I think that couldn't be more appropriate than it is for the watch world, because it is an unending warren. Like Mark said, there's tons of stuff that's always coming out, new stuff every day. And if you tire of the new stuff, well, you've got over 100 years of vintage wristwatch history that you can go back and dig into. And trust me, I have no illusions. I know that the stories that brands are building around these pieces, whether it be in the past or whether it be their new stuff now, they're designed to sucker me in. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the story that says that owning a Speedmaster puts me closer to walking on the moon. And I also like doing exactly what we're doing here right now, which is basically having a chat with like-minded people. And the thing about chatting with like-minded people is that you often share more than one thing in common, whether that be gear or travel or other things that are going on in your life. So I think it's really like a club. And it's a club for enabling addicts, but, the conversation's good.
Can I say something? I never even thought about that, because I am a research-obsessed person. So I love going down the rabbit hole of buying. When I buy something new, I go down the rabbit hole and I know everything about it. I remember my TV phase. I remember my vacuum phase. I love
cell phones.
Yes. I just bought a new cell phone. Like, I love the hunt. And you know what? I don't think about that with watches, but that's it. I absolutely am obsessed with the hunt and the rabbit hole of constantly looking for the next thing. So yeah, I get it.
Can we just back up? Can we just back up to the vacuum phase?
I can't buy anything without going down the rabbit hole. I can't.
That's great.
So next up, we have a question from Adrian at watch_ADN on Instagram. He's a good friend of mine. We actually met up in Spain last year, where he's from, in Zaragoza, and he helped us a lot on the trip with recommendations and things like that. But he asks, although nobody knows what the future is going to be, what do you think the watch market will be like in 20 years? Do you think the smartwatches will replace mechanical or quartz watches, and these will be just a luxury item? Brent?
I think that the more things change, the more they stay the same. People in the 1920s said that the radio was going to kill the newspaper. People in the 1950s said that television was going to kill radio. And then in the 90s, the internet came along and it was supposed to kill everything. But, have those media really changed? Sure, they've morphed, they've adapted, but they've trundled on. I mean, look at us today. We are recording a long form audio podcast in a world that's inundated with moving images. And yet, I don't think radio or podcasting has ever been so popular. So I think watches are the same. And I also think they benefit from something else, and that's authenticity. And, they're real, they're concrete. You can actually touch them. They're crafted by real people. And in a digital age, I think that many people, that's exactly what it is that they're looking for. For example, there's no other reason to put an exhibition case back on a Seiko 5 diver than to hook new initiates in. Because as complicated as watchmaking and mechanical movements are, you can actually see how they function. Whereas digital watches, computers, the internet, they're so opaque and, incomprehensible by comparison. So, yeah, I think that ultimately, if we take a look at statistics, I pulled a few off of Statista. Watch wearing was on the decline from 1991 till about 2010 by about 2% a year, which is huge. And then all of a sudden, there's like a turnaround. And ever since 2010, people have begun to wear more and more watches. Now, you might attribute a little bit of that to the Apple Watch phenomena, but actually Apple Watch wasn't released until 2015. So ultimately, the ship had turned around before then. And I just think that a watch, like a lot of other things, is just an expression of who you are. And people are always going to want to do that. So I think 20 years from now, we could be sitting around having this exact same podcast with this exact same conversation. What about you, Mark?
I'm going to be really old, man. Yeah, speaking of someone who's been in this for a very long time and seeing how it's morphed and changed over the years, from being very niche and just being a pack of nerds from all over Canada, the US and Europe and everywhere, talking on a small forum called timezone.com and trying to share our knowledge and our experiences with different brands and different watches, to eventually, Watch You Seek showed up and other ones, and they started getting really popular, and they had breakdown forums for brands, and then influencers came on board and everything blew up with, gold and diamond crusted watches on Lamborghini steering wheels and other garbage you see on influencers on Instagram, which have brought in people that want watches. And, if that's what got them to our hobby, and then they started looking at Monta or, Xenia or any of these brands and started picking up, that's a good thing, right? I mean, I don't have to like the diamonds and the gold and all that stuff, but if it brings people into our community and gets them to learn about our hobby, and it just fosters more of these relationships like we're developing now, that's fantastic. As far as the smartwatches killing the industry or taking over, I think it's a gateway also. I know a lot of people who start off, I've been wearing a watch in years, I use my cell phone, and then they got themselves a smartwatch, and then they got used to having the time available to them at any time they want on their wrist without having to pull something out of their pocket or out of their bag or purse. Then they buy themselves a watch, and then they learn, like Brent said, turn it over and see the mechanism on the inside, the little gears, the springs, and the more they learn, I think we're in for a treat. I mean, there's going to be more and more micro brands. There are going to be others that are going to die off. The quality of these micro brands is really getting up there. Like I said before about the Ikigai watch that's coming my way, the quality and the craftsmanship and it's starting to blur the lines between what the Swiss can make and what's being made in Asia. I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. I just hope that prices start getting a little more realistic. I love the new Omega Ultra Deep. I got to handle it on bracelet. The quality of the metal is really out of this world. It's Omega Steel or whatever silly name they've used to describe it, but it's much brighter and whiter than regular stainless steel. It's heavy. It's got this crazy clasp. It's ginormous, but it's $17,000 Canadian, brand new. I am sorry, but that's like my first 4 cars didn't add up to $17,000. Okay. So something's got to give. These prices can't keep climbing this way. And let's see what happens in the future. Prices have come down from pandemic highs and the stupid markets and the cryptocurrency bros and all that stuff. So let's hope that prices come down and be a little more affordable, so it can be a little more fun for all of us. But, microbrands are picking up the slack. So that's my take on that. What about you, Bob?
I kind of agree with both of you guys, really. But for me, I I've been into watches like kind of in the community since like maybe 2016, 2017. And I feel like it's totally exploded since then. Like there's just so many more people that are into it. I always compare watches when I'm talking to non-watch people, a lot of times family members, to classic cars, even though they're kind of redundant. They're not so practical anymore. Watches or classic cars are cool, and people like cool stuff. And I think they're going to still be 20 years. So, yeah. Dan?
The smartwatches aren't going to replace them. More people will have them as a convenience and, connectivity. But I mean, they're watches. I think you just covered it sort of. They're collectibles. They're like classic cars. They're cool things you can physically hold and admire. They'll always just be beautiful collectibles like art, right? Like no matter the value, and, microbands driving it, the same thing. So I kind of agree with everything you guys said. It's like, the one thing I don't know about, it's just a cheap seagull movement. But when you see that, your pants move. Like you just want cool.
If you're wearing pants.
Yeah. But that's the thing. You want cool, beautiful things. And like Rolexes are classic baller things. So as long as like rich, fancy rappers and celebrities are wearing these things, the youth will want them, and they'll want to have cool, collectible things like that. So I don't think they'll ever die. And yes, and like you say, micro brands are going to keep driving that, and they're getting better. They're getting awesome. And dealing with small boutique brands like that, that's what attracts you to keep getting into these sort of things.
Yeah, agreed. So I got two questions now. I'll ask the first one from my friend Chris Ansoulis, who's at Popping Crowns on Instagram. He started his own website called poppingcrowns.com. Go check out his writing. He's a great guy, and he's a lot of fun, and I think you'd enjoy it. So his first question, if you could design a watch that would allow you to travel in time, what features would it have, aside from obviously the traveling feature? And what era would you first visit? How about you, Brent?
One of my favorite novels of all time is The Great Gatsby. So for me, I would go back to New York of the 1920s, the Roaring 20s. I think about things like the Algonquin Round Table, the Harlem Renaissance, all that great literature, all that great music, the speakeasies, Lindbergh taking flight over the Atlantic, just the energy, the beginning of the skyscraper age, all that kind of stuff. So that's definitely where I'd go. But my watch would have to have three complications beyond the time travel complication. The first is a witty comeback generator, so I could keep up with Dorothy Parker.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The second would be a liver purifier, because I'd be drinking a lot of cocktails, I think, in that era.
That's crazy.
And then the last one would be an antibiotic generator, because I ain't going nowhere past the 40s without antibiotics.
It's a fluoride toothpaste too. What about you, Bob?
Okay, well, I just realized I totally misread that question, first of all. So I thought if we could pick a watch, not design a watch. So I'm going to kind of just go with my own answer. But if we could choose a watch and what complication it would have, for me, I'd want to fit in where I'm going back to. So I would have a watch with just the date, the good old two-tone date just, and I'd be heading straight for the 80s.
The 80s.
The hair, the music, the movies, everything. Love that era. Mark?
Very cool. I'm in between Brent's crazy answers and what you did. So basically, I'd want a chronograph, because I figure any time moving or time traveling device would have like a time limit. Like it'd only be in that time for a certain amount of time. And I want to make sure that I know when that is. So the chronograph would be able to track that. So that's what I came up with. If I would have thought of the liver thing, I would have thought of that. And when would I go? I would probably go to the future and find out what the next Nautilus and Royal Oak is going to be, and pick up a whole bunch of them when I come back. That's what I would do. And hopefully it's something that I like, and not these crazy integrated bracelet sports watches again. That's my answer. What about you, Dan?
You are all wrong. The
Come on, the liver thing is really good.
The only correct answer is dinosaurs. Dinosaurs. If you are going back to see real live dinosaurs, you're lying. You are
I
crazy.
saw Jurassic Park. It's good enough.
This watch take you through time. You can go to the 30s, the 80s, the future, anytime you want. But you know you're going to look at dinosaurs.
Will your schedule complication allow you to run really, really, really fast?
No. And I have no thoughts on complications because I did not prep for these questions, but something about finding my pants. Yes.
Because the mosquitoes over there are really big.
A pants tracker.
So, all right, we have a second question from Popping Crowns, as Mark already let us know, and he says, "I've seen and heard many YouTubers and podcasters make lists of what owning different watch brands says about you as an owner. Here's my spin: if your current favorite watch could speak, what would that watch tell us about you?" What do you think, Mark?
Well, my favorite watch is my Grand Seiko GMT. Again, a very special watch to me. And it thinks I'm a complete idiot. And the reason why is because I finally got to travel with it this summer and use the GMT function. And what do? When I get the grease, I buy a dive watch and I put it in the safe at the hotel. So yeah, it thinks I'm pretty stupid. What about you, Bob?
Well, my favorite watch right now is the Black Bay Pro, and I was kind of struggling with this one at first, but then I thought maybe it would say something along the lines of that we have a lot in common, the watch and myself. We love to travel, and we're a little on the thick side. It's been hitting the gym lately, but still got that dad body going on here.
That's good. What about you, Brent?
Well, before I bought my Honda Ridgeline, I was a Jeep driver from about 1997 until last year. And at one point, I wondered to myself, do I drive a Jeep because I want people to think a certain thing about me? Or do I drive a Jeep because it's a logical extension of my lifestyle? And I think the answer is you can't really separate the two. It's kind of both. So I think it's the same for watches, and it's the same for most of the trappings that we have in our life. So I think my watches would say that that I guess that I'm a little left of normal, but not that far. That I like fine things, but I don't like to waste my money. I like the outdoors and I like adventure, but I'm not about to summit Everest.
What about you, Dan?
What am I want to say? Well, for me, I have the honeymoon with the latest watch. So the latest watch was the white Snoopy Moonswap. So basically, I love Snoopy, and being Christmas, I'll be watching Charlie Brown quite a few times. Yeah.
And you know what? Snoopy doesn't wear pants either.
He doesn't.
Well, I'm going to stop with the pants jokes because I think I milked that one.
Yes, talk more about my hair, please.
All right.
Sure.
All right. So the next question comes from James Fournier, a friend of Mark's, goes by Flying Spring Bars on Instagram. Will big watches ever come back in style, Mark?
Yeah, I don't think they ever went out of style. I mean, brands like Breitling and Omega and Oris, Mito, and even Rolex still have all their sports watches at 40 millimeters and above. I think there's a market for it. Yes, Hodinkee and Worn Around and Fratello and Monochrome and all those guys are all talking about 36 to 38 millimeters. But that's not the general public. That's the enthusiasts. And we all know that as enthusiasts, we're probably, 10% of the market, maybe 20 at the very most. People who want a watch for the graduation, or, you're retiring, or, milestone stuff, regular normal people, muggles, will go to a store and probably want to get a big watch. That's what people like. I still love them. I mean, I had just recently, I had a 46 millimeter Avenger GMT from Breitling. I loved it. I mean, it's legible, it's big, it's honking, it's beautiful, it's well made. But yeah, I think that they're here to stay. I don't think that they're going anywhere. There's a market for it. People are buying them. And believe me, if people weren't buying them, brands like Rolex and Omega and all those people wouldn't be making them. So Personally, 39 millimeters is as small as I'm going to go, and probably won't buy one at 39 millimeters, but 40 to 42 is my sweet spot. And look, I have a Timex Q that I absolutely adore. It sits on my desk. It's a memento of a day I spent with my son in Ottawa, and I don't wear it, but I absolutely love it. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. Is it going to come back as a fad like it was when it first was introduced, back in the late 90s when Panerai was coming around with those giant honking 44 millimeters and 46 millimeter square watches? I don't know. But Panerai is still around, and they're still making big watches, and they're still selling. So that's my take on it. What about you, Brent?
Well, I was going to answer in the same way. Basically, have they really gone out of style? And I was going to use Breitling and Panerai as examples. I understand that brands have begun anew to reissue watches that are sort of like 36 millimeters, but I think you have to be kind of wary of people who set themselves up as tastemakers in the media because, like you said, Mark, ultimately, I'm still wearing my big watches. I think most of you guys, I don't think people, if anybody is selling their big watches because a media outlet told them that it was no longer in, then you're not in the hobby for the right reasons. So I think, trends, they come and they go. Style is forever. And I think that big watches will always be in style.
Yeah, for me, I completely agree with you guys. And I saw it firsthand, actually, when I worked for 2 years at Gem Bijou as the shop manager. And I played a big part in the ordering of watches. As an example, I can remember when the Longines Spirit came out. I think the first one was like either a 40 or a 42, and everybody was asking for a smaller version. Why?
Well, hold on. That one has very long end links and wears really big.
It does. But when the smaller version finally came along, I said to Sam, let's stock up on these, and they just didn't move. And you can say that a lot across the line on all just about any watch. The smaller stuff just does not sell like the bigger versions do in most cases anyways. And for me personally, I'm a huge fan of Panerai. I love a Grail watch for me is the Pro Cloth. Love that watch. I love Seiko Tunas. But I like small watches too. I just like them all. So maybe that's a problem. It is for my pocketbook sometimes, but yeah. So what about you, Dan?
As long as Fossil keeps pushing dinner plates to the general public, people are still going to want big watches. But you guys are talking about 40s and 41s and 42s being big. I don't see that. When I got my 50th birthday watch between a 41 and a 36 Datejust, I just couldn't justify going smaller than the 41 for the watch I wanted. It just seemed like the right size watch. And who doesn't want a 44 millimeter Navi timer? It's just a freaking cool looking watch. Or the Speedmaster's no small watch, and that's just classic timepiece. Yeah, those are just classic watches. So no, big watches aren't going to disappear, but I hope tacky fashion watches at 48 and 50 millimeters do. That's my two cents.
Yeah. Yeah. So our next question comes from Randy, who goes by Scrandalous on Instagram. With the major rebrand of Jaguar all over the news and the internet, is there a brand you'd like to see or could use as a rebrand or change the focus and get people talking about them again? Or in the later end of the question, is there a brand you'd like to see do a fun Moonswatch collab? What about you, Bob? What do you think?
I was having another one. This is another question where I had a bit of a struggle with, but the only brand that I can think of right now that we've all seen kind of go down the tubes when it comes to the watch community perception is Seiko. I feel like they're getting lost in the reissues right now, especially the Prospex line, and I'd like to see them do something new, something modern. I know they just did that release with the octagonal kind of bezel shape.
Yeah, Squircle
wasn't a hit, but I think that's a brand that could use some sort of a rejig. I wouldn't be the guy to know how to do that, but that's the one that comes to mind for me. As far as a Swatch collab, not Moonswatch collab, I'm going to go back to Swatch group watches I'd love to see. as a collab with Swatch, and that would be the Pro Plof that I just mentioned before.
Oh,
I think
wow.
that would be awesome. Imagine.
Oh, that's a great answer. Hey, can I change my answer? Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. That'd be so cool.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Brent?
Well, for me, it's Bulova. It's hands down Bulova. Vincent from, his name's Vincent Piro from VFP.watches on Instagram. He commented on something I posted not too long ago about the Speedmaster CK2998. And what he said was he wondered why Bulova didn't make better use of its moon story with the lunar pilot. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, between the lunar pilot and the Accutron, Bulova's got just as much space chops in a way, kind of like this rogue agent space chops. For example, in the, it was David Scott, I think, that wore it on Apollo 15. And it could be known as the only watch to accidentally land on the moon. And you know what? It came to the rescue of his Speedmaster because his Speedmaster's crystal popped off. And so when he was doing extravehicular activity, he had to slap on that Bulova watch. So I just think, boy, wouldn't that be an amazing reissue? Not only what they've done now with quartz, but make it kind of like 39 to 41 millimeters, pop in a manual wound movement like the original would have had, issue it on that sort of Velcro NATO that the original one came on. And boy, you'd have to hold me back from buying that watch, I think. So I would love to see them go, double down on that lunar pilot stuff.
And maybe do something with their electrostatic movements with those crazy Accutrons that they're trying to. They're too big. I know we were just talking about big watches, but these things are honking huge. And it's a cool technology and no one's talking about it. And they're not trying to refine it or make it smaller or, like HYT did. I mean, they had these crazy water-filled or liquid-filled watches that tell time. Now they've refined them. They're smaller. They look fantastic. I think Accutron's dropping the ball on quite a few levels. And your Swatch collab?
I gotta admit, I didn't come up with a whole lot. I haven't been really huge on the Swatch collabs. I would say that I definitely like the Blancpain better than I liked the Moon Swatch ones. But if you really want to do something crazy, go out and do one with Breguet, and then like the Type 20. And that,
God damn it, that was my answer.
Oh, yes.
So Bob came up with a better answer than me, and then Brent took my answer. Yeah, for me, it's ball watch. I was a huge ball watch collector. I was even the ball watch forum moderator on Watch You Seek and on Time Zone at the same time, behind the scenes on Time Zone, because Time Zone wanted to put their own person there. But I was working for Jeff Hess in Ball Watch Company in the States. I'm a huge fan. I've always loved their watches. They had 3 or 4 lines at the time. They had a specific sports line called the Hydrocarbon. Then they had the Master Series and the Master Engineer and then they had a Train Master and some other stuff. But now it's gotten to a point where all the lines are bleeding into each other. There are dive watches in every single line, and the design cues in one flips over to the other. The bracelets of one go on to the other, and they put magnifying date lenses on almost everything. They're not Rolex. Give it up, man. Just get some focus. It needs proper leadership. They need to drop some lines and really something has got to give. And they make way too many watches. So I don't understand how they do that and still going. The quality is still fantastic. I don't know if you guys have handled a recent ball watch, but the quality is really there. And then, of course, the tritium tubes are fantastic. I've always loved that stuff. But they really need help. And just recently, they got themselves in some hot water by posting a comment that was politically charged after the recent elections, and that got them in some huge hot water on both sides. So, anyways, the Ball Watch would be my company, and if someone says Davide Serrato should take over and rebrand, no, someone else. As far as my collab, it was the Breguet Type 20. I think that would have been really cool in a Swatch version of it. What else can there be? I don't know. The Blancpain was really cool. Maybe a Seamaster of some sort, like a James Bond version on a NATO. That would be kind of cool. But I mean, the Blancpain is pretty close to something like that. What about you, Dan?
I've actually been thinking about this one this year, so this is a good question. Seiko is a great one that you guys have all made great ones. maybe a year ago, it was like, oh, what's Longines been doing? I think they're becoming an older looking brand, but now they've fixed that. Like, they look great. Hamilton, I'd like to see Hamilton do more with what they're doing, but the answer is Bulova, Rovi. It's, the answer Bulova. It's, and the reason for that is I was really impressed with those recent releases, the square dial with the vintage, and Bulova needs to do what Timex did the last 3 or 4 years, release all their vintage styles. I don't know who it is in the watch fam, but he's got one of those like 70s Bulovas with the fluted bezel. It's got that whole old like president style going on. Like, Bulova, they need to realize that they're slipping into the department store, like old Manny watches with a lot of styles. And they would do so well with the Timex vintage, bring back all those classic styles because they have beauties, and that's what's driving the enthusiast market right now, right? Like, that's what we see people leaning towards. That's why I love Timex Qs. Like, they need to go after stuff like that, and they could get into a whole rebrand of what Timex has done.
Do you think that Citizen having, owning Bulova, being sister brands, do they want to compete with each other's historical catalogs? I mean, do they want to keep them? Do they want to keep Bulova lower in the the Bay or Macy's of the world, and Citizen a little higher, or what do you think of that?
I think Citizen is in the same conversation of doing more to. When I see the Bulovas and the Citizens, those are just becoming like the back counter of the Bay, like old people brands. Like, they have these old catalogs that they could both benefit from each other. Just, the vintage route and the classic, and then getting into more of the mainstream new stuff. I mean, they have opportunity because of classic names, right?
Yeah, true. And what's your take on the Swatch collab struggle? Is your turn to struggle with this?
I haven't had enough to think about it, but whoever said like the Bond Seamaster stuff like that is kind of a great idea. Like, it's kind of an automatic given, right?
But you would think. I would have thought they did Omega before Blancpain.
Yeah.
Because they were, maybe they wanted to switch brands because they already did the Omega with the Speedmaster, right?
Who's under the? I'd have to go look, but what are like the 12 brands under the Omega umbrella? Like, it's huge, right?
Big.
Like, I'd have to go look again.
Yeah, it's big.
I think the main issue there is that they want to do iconic watches, and some of those brands over the years, after having been absorbed by Swatch, don't necessarily have that one-off iconic watch. Like, I just wrote a review recently of the Longines Spirit Zulu Time Titanium, and part of what I think is really great about that brand new collection is that this may become their one watch. That may be the one that people look at and say, okay, that's the Longines. And I kind of have it on good authority too, that when people call up and ask for that, they don't ask for the Longines. They say, do you have the Zulu Time? And I think that's going to be it for them. So, I mean, years down the road, you might be able to do that collab, but I just don't think it would come off right now. So
I think Omega is just the biggest mainstream brand in the catalog. So it would make sense to just stick to their products if you're going to do them, right? Yeah.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about back catalogs and stuff, our next question was submitted by Petra, who goes by PJ Photo Journey on IG. That's PJ_photo_journey. And she asks, what was the most spectacular watch purchase with a historical background that you've had so far? What do you think, Bob?
For me, I'm not hugely into vintage watches, but the one for me would have to be the Zin 157. And it's not just the watch, it's the movement, like the watch and that particular watch and the movement. There's a connection back to the whole space thing. There's a military connection, a racing connection with that movement. I think it's the coolest chronograph movement on the face of the earth, personally. It's one of my all-time favorite movements. That's a huge, gigantic rabbit hole, and I know we're going quite long here already, so I'm not going to go down that entire thing today. But if you give it a Google, it's a really interesting watch itself, but the movement more so even than the watch, the Lumania 5100.
Yeah, good choice. What about you, Mark?
My the historical background is tough because I've always collected contemporary watches. My most spectacular purchase. It was actually a trade. Was I had a Breitling Chronomat GMT, not the recent versions, the one that came right before the new Rouleau bracelet versions, right? So I had that thing. It was a big watch, and brand new, it's quite valuable, but pre-owned, they're, like all Breitlings, they take quite the bath. And I posted up for trade because that's what I normally do, just putting out feelers to see if anything pops up. And a gentleman from Hawaii contacted me and said, I have a Rolex Explorer 2, the new version, the 42 millimeter on bracelet that's fairly new that I don't wear. Would you want to trade? And at the time I said, look, I'm not looking to trade up. I don't want to add any funds and feelers for whatever. So he gave, we stopped talking, and he contacted me again, asked me more questions about the Breitling, and then contacted me again. And he said, okay, tell you what, let's just trade. And I've always liked, I had the original, whatever, I don't do James Stacey numbers. I don't remember the numbers for the original 5-digit GMT Explorer 2. But I had one of those and I loved it. And this one was even better. It's bigger, it's bolder, the bigger hands, bigger boom plots, the bracelet's better, the clasp was better. And I was so excited. And I got that watch and I had it for a while. And that's my biggest spectacular trade. And that was right before the prices started climbing. And then when they did start climbing, I started getting I'm wearing a $10,000 watch. I'm wearing a $12,000 watch. I'm wearing a $14,000 watch. And when it surpassed the value of my car, I was like, I don't know, man, this is getting a little expensive. And then I started thinking, wow, what can I get with this if I trade it? Like compared to what I would have gotten for my Breitling. A year later, or just under a year, I wound up trading it for an IWC Engineer GMT, a Tudor Pelagos, an Oris, a Source of Life watch I bought brand new, and I had some cash left over from that one watch. That was pretty spectacular. That's my deal. And the gentleman that I traded with is still friends with. He's a Navy officer in Hawaii. I think he still wears he actually put luminant in the cutouts for the dive bezel. He had that done, and it looked really, really cool. He loves it. So who's next? Dan?
I don't really own anything. I know when I was looking for my 50th birthday watch, and I enjoyed the story behind watches and, an Explorer and the whole Hillary thing. But when it comes to historical significance to me, my date just being a Rolex was the one watch I wanted, because Rolex always had that status of achievement, that symbol of it, but it's sort of a synonymous brand with golf for me. And being a kid growing up with golf on TV and the Open Championship, and it's the official clock at every tournament, the timekeeping clock. And Nicholas still has I think he just sold it, his first gold Rolex he won as a prize in like 1968. And for me, it's just always been the brand Rolex has sort of meant something to me. And that's kind of why I got it as my 50th birthday watch. That was sort of like the watch that meant achievement of a lifetime for me.
Well, my watch for historical significance would be the Omega Speedmaster 125. It's a bit of an odd duck amongst the Speedmaster family for sure, but it is the world's first ever COSC certified automatic chronograph. And beyond that, it also went to space on the arm of a Russian cosmonaut by the name of Vladimir Janibekov. So I think that's one that's I actually bought it because it was made in 1973, which is my birth year. But the historical significance obviously played into that final choice. Yeah,
I've never seen one of those live. If ever we get together sometime soon, I need to see that thing because it's spectacular. It's quite impressive.
Yeah. Well, start working out because you definitely need to have an arm.
All right, so we got the next question here. This is from Trevor, who's edc.knife and tool on Instagram. What are your top 3 recommendations for a great starter watch suitable for an EDC enthusiast, considering materials and functionality? While companies like RZE have a significant influence in the EDC community, are there other similar or alternative brands and suggestions you would propose?
Yeah. When I think EDC, I'm thinking, those pocket dump pictures you see with the wallet and the pen and the this and the that. And a lot of that stuff usually is titanium. And I'm thinking for someone who's in the EDC space, who's not into watches yet, right, who's interested, is kind of curious about watches, I'm thinking those new titanium Timex GMTs, either the James Brand one with the Miyota 9000 series, or the standard version that kind of looks like Bob's Tudor GMT. Those are fantastic, and they're not too expensive. $600, $400, somewhere in the neighborhood, US. I think those would be great for someone starting out. Another one is Marathon. I mean, bulletproof watches. You can get them in either quartz or automatic versions. Those tritium tubes that I've been talking about nearly the entire podcast. There are some thin ones. There's some bigger ones. So yeah, Marathon would be great, and they're bulletproof and solid, and a great Canadian company. And then apart from that, I think if you're doing EDC and you're someone of an outdoor person, adventurers and rugged, can't go wrong with a G-Shock. I mean, there are all kinds of different versions. You can get them that are analog. You can get them that are completely digital. There's connected ones. There's just metal ones now. So G-Shock was my third brand.
Yeah, I would have gone totally RZE if he hadn't mentioned that already. By extension, I'd go Boulder as well. Boulder's another really good micro brand down the same road that RZE is. Also makes some titanium stuff, etc. I would definitely go Marathon, like you say, Mark, like the SS Nav if you want a little bit higher end entry. But they also have that, I think they call it, it's the Field Watch, but I think it might be called the Captain's version or something like that, or the Officer's Watch, actually, I think is what it's called, because it has a little bit bump in water resistance up to 100 meters. So I love that. And again, by extension, I would go CWC, the Mellor 72. What a classic. Like that's just, I don't know why I don't own that, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's where I'd land with my choice for EDC.
What about you, Dan? You got any suggestions for the EDC?
You just named them all, but RZE is the go-to. But I also see a lot of the EDC stuff for me is like visual flat light stuff. So I don't always think of necessarily titanium. I think of look and style. And if I got to name one brand that nobody talks about enough, I think it's the Canopy Wake one, like my black one. It's just it's a gorgeous looking solid watch in that space. So that would be, if I had to name a watch, that's the one.
A good alternative is direct composition with RZE. And what was the other brand that you mentioned? Micro brand Boulder. Yeah, it would be one of my favorites that I've ever gotten hands on with is the SWC Bunker. I don't know if you guys have seen that yet or not, but yeah, they have insane lume. I think they do I think it's 20 layers of Super LumiNova and then 10 layers of AR, and it's just everything is extra with that watch. Titanium again too. It's a really good one. RZE's got to be in the top. Probably would have been my top pick too. Another one that you don't see a lot of people talking about that I really like, I've owned a couple of them, is Oceanus, Casio Oceanus. There's some good affordables. The S100, I think, is like $500 or $600 Canadian dollars. It's got a lot of techie stuff similar to what you'd find in a G-Shock. And then the last, of course, is G-Shock. G-Shock, to me, is the ultimate EDC watch.
So our last question comes from Ricky from Scottish Watches, who also had it on the podcast. He says, since starting your own show, what is the biggest surprise with the process that you didn't expect? Was it the time involved in planning, recording, editing, interaction with our listeners? What's the biggest thing that surprised us? And I'm going to throw this at Brent, since he's pretty much our in-house producer doing most of the heavy lifting. What do you say, Brent?
Well, certainly the learning curve in the production, particularly around sound and getting a certain quality of sound was a surprise. But, I think it may be the biggest surprise has nothing to do with the planning, with the production or anything like that. For me, the biggest surprise is the guests. We thought we were just going to be three guys sitting around chatting about watches. And then lo and behold, we had this amazing lineup of guests who just sort of dropped into our laps and came and have really raised, I think, the quality of the show for their level of knowledge and their sort of like their reputation in the field of watches, etc. So yeah, I think that it's interesting how the community just flocked to the show for that reason. So yeah, that would be my biggest surprise.
Is it the correct answer? We didn't think Dan was going to invite himself on. Didn't I message somebody and say, you should have an impromptu special podcast about the 12 days of Dansome?
Actually, Dan, to be honest with you, you reached out and it was a great idea. It wasn't oh, let's discuss it. We'll find out. Maybe we should, or it was an automatic in my book it was yes for me right away. And it was perfect timing for the 12 days of Dansome. It was a perfect to be a guest host, not to be a guest where we'd ask you a bunch of questions, but to participate with us because you're a friend of ours. It was great. And when I asked, Brent and Bob, it didn't even take a second for us to say yes.
About it. I had to think about it for a while.
What about you, Bob?
Yeah, this was a good one. I think there's a learning curve, like Brent says, and we're still right in the middle of it. A big surprise is some of the Mark's been really after some next level guests and some may come through this. I'm pretty surprised about the guests we've had on and the potential of some of the guests that we'll have down the road. But for me, it's just been a lot of fun chatting watches, meeting new people. Like we had Zach on the other day, and I knew Zach from Worn and Wound, Weiss. I knew who he was, but didn't know really a lot about him personally. So it's just been a lot of fun getting to know people in this way, and looking forward to keeping it going.
Yeah, for me, the learning curve. We mentioned that we're still right in the learning curve, but the initial issue at the very beginning was getting the podcast displayed or available on the different platforms. Right? Remember the iTunes debacle because our picture wasn't perfectly square. It held that up for a while. Then we had the issues with YouTube and then their algorithm, and we thought we'd launch it and everything would go smoothly. And our not URL, what is it called? The RSS feed would just be pulled. But there was a lot of work that went behind between Brent and myself going to all these places, and that was a pain in the ass. But that's done and it's working correctly. Podbeam has been a great service for us. It's been a little difficult, but I think we figured something out today about the permissions, which will allow our guests to come on. And then I've always been worried about when we get a guest, like Zach Weiss or Andrew or better yet, even Ricky, right? Ricky from Scottish Watches, who's a very, very busy person and just hosts 2 podcasts a week and travels all over the place, was asking the guests, please download Podbeam on your cell phone because you can't use it on your computer. And then send us your recording once you're done. Because initially we recorded the whole thing on one file and it was all our voices stepping all over each other all the time. This was only maybe one or 2 episodes. And then we figured out that each phone is recording its own voice, and then Brent can go ahead and do his magic. But getting that done, I'm always afraid that we'll get a guest and I'm not downloading a thing on my phone. I don't want to send you, I'm worried about that. But so far it hasn't come up. And like you guys said, we've been very, very blessed with guests that have been wanting to come on the show, right? Jody from Just One More Watch on YouTube came on, and he said that, it must be easy for you guys to get guests. You guys have all the connections. Just ask, and people say yes automatically. It's been like that, but I didn't expect it to be, right? I expected to have to not necessarily beg, but and we didn't initially start off thinking we're going to be a guest show, right? Like Bob said, we were just going to be 3 guys talking about our experiences, and as seasoned older gentlemen that have experienced lots of watches over the years, that we were going to have these conversations and go from there. But it's been one guest after another. It's been fantastic and a lot of fun. So that's what surprised me is the quality of the guests. And just to drop a little nugget, we're going to have William Messina from Messina Labs on our show in early January 2025. So for our listeners, keep a listen out for that.
So, Dan, all of the rest of the questions are pants related, and there's no hair ones whatsoever. I just want to sort of leave the mic open to you if there's anything you wanted to close out with, if you want to talk a little bit more of the 12 days.
No, the 12 days of Dansome, I just want it to become a thing, and it doesn't have to be about me. It just be about community and community involvement and supporting all these companies, because people want giveaways, but you also got to support the companies. So you got to go to them and check out their websites. It's another reason I don't you haven't noticed a lot of product shots in the videos, because if people are serious, I want them going to the Instagram pages and the websites and checking them out and being invested in these brands that we're, supporting. So now it's just, I want to thank everybody in the communities, the golf, the watches, Instagram in general, because we pull people from outside of our, expertise, right? Or, our platforms. So just thank you to everyone who supports us. That's what I have to say about it. Thank you to you guys for having me on.
No, not a problem. And we have news for you. 12 Days of Dansome is a thing already.
Yeah, 100%.
Somebody said, you're like Batman, where you're just a symbol now, and the people are running with it. And I will take that analogy. Yes.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Awesome. All right, so I guess we are ready to wrap it up. Thanks to everyone that joined in with their questions. It was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely do this again sometime. Thanks to Dan for coming on today, especially with how busy you are this time of year. Everyone, get over to the Dansome on Instagram so you don't miss out on the rest of the 12 days of Dansome, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Time to Calibrate is available anywhere you can listen to fine podcasts, so please do subscribe, like, and hit all those bells and whistles. It does make a difference. Until next time, thanks for listening.